I was at the zoo one day when Packy was pacing around, and this little girl with her mom said, "Mommy, that elephant is sad." This is a 2-year-old child. And I thought this child can see what us adults are so conditioned not to see.
Welcome to Bearing Weight, a space for the stories elephants can't tell, shared by the people who know them best. Hosted by the Weeping Elephant Project. Welcome back to Bearing Weight. My name is Danielle Carnahan. I'm the executive director at Weeping Elephant Project, and I'm here with my co-host and the founder of Weeping Elephant Project, David Ebert. Today, we're joined by Courtney Scott. Courtney is an elephant consultant for In Defense of Animals, the founder of Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants, and the filmmaker behind the documentary From Suffering to Satori. Courtney has spent over a decade standing outside zoo gates, compiling the annual 10 Worst Zoos for Elephants list, and fighting to retire elephants from facilities that are failing them. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to commit to a fight you might not win in your lifetime, and why ending captive breeding has never been more crucial. So without further ado, let's get into it. We like to open the podcast with everyone by asking about your elephant origin story. So, how you first started working with elephants and what made you choose to decide to dedicate your life to working with them or for them.
Right. Well, it started back around 2008. I was working on a film at that time about animals, and I had heard about the elephant program at the Oregon Zoo and that they were going to create this bond measure to create an offsite preserve. So, since I was doing the film, I went up there to check it out. I had never even seen an elephant in a zoo or anywhere for that matter.
Tell us a little bit about I read about it a little bit, but about the movie that you did.
Yeah, my movie is called From Suffering to Satori, and it's basically my own journey of awareness to animal abuse and confinement. So it's been about 10 years since I produced and directed it, and we're actually gonna be showing it on IDA's platform in August. So I'll
Right.
invite all of you to check it out. But anyway, so yeah, that's my film, and I went up to the zoo, and so the first time I saw this elephant, Packy, and it just struck me to my core because it's this giant being trapped in this steel barred cell that looked exactly like a prison. And I watched him pace back and forth, back and forth. And at that time, he was 47. And I thought, he's been doing this every day of his life for 47 years. The exhibit is about 1 acre, and they had 8 elephants. And
Whoa.
Packy was isolated because he showed aggression, right? Especially during must. So I was just transfixed. What else happened to me, which I call satori, which is a moment of enlightenment, is I suddenly felt the soul, the reality of this other being's experience and understood what it was like for him. As in other words, I wasn't looking at an object or another someone separate from me. I was looking at someone who was connected and I understood exactly what they were going through. That was the first time. I mean, I always had dogs and cats, but I never associated other animals that way. And anyway, that just made me start my journey. I started Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants. And then later on, I became affiliated with the In Defense of Animals, and now I'm their elephant consultant. And I work on all elephants in every zoo and basically in every part of the world as well.
It's amazing what you guys are doing now. What was it like when you were fighting for Packy specifically and he
Yeah.
ended up dying in the zoo's care? How did that impact you and the work that you were doing?
It was devastating. It
Yeah,
was
I'm sure.
devastating because I couldn't save him.
Yeah.
The zoo, even as you know, killed him because he was a liability and he was no longer able to breed and they couldn't get rid of his TB. So even though one of his keepers begged to save him because he was actually doing better after getting off the TB drugs. So that part was devastating,
Yeah.
but the worst part was just knowing that nothing I could do was going to change it, and we tried everything. I mean, literally everything. We went to testify at the Metro Council regularly. We got support from Lily Tomlin, from Bob Barker, from Dame Daphne Sheldrick. I got several op-eds published in the local paper. I had debates with every single zoo director. I just don't know what else. And yet I kept thinking there must be something else.
Yeah.
Tried to get Ed Stewart to agree to take Packy. He would not agree to that because he felt that the circus elephants were in worse shape. So he was more focused on getting those elephants. And of course, they only have so much room, right? Even in a sanctuary. So that was the whole thing was just frustrating. And in a way, sounds terrible, but in a way, I was glad when he died because I was just so anxious all the time because I couldn't do anything. So the frustration took a toll, to be honest with you, and also I knew it had to be better on the other side, you
Yeah,
know?
his quality of life was so poor.
Yeah, exactly.
Felt the same way about Happy at the Bronx Zoo.
Right.
It
Right.
was a relief, which is a
Yes,
horrible thing, but it was a relief. What you talked
exactly.
about in terms of thinking about the elephant's experience, I think is a huge thing. I think if you think about any being in a cage 24 hours a day for 50, 60 years,
Yeah,
it's intolerable if you consider the elephant's experience. I was interested in hearing you say that. Talk about that.
yeah. It is. It's just shocking that people accept it too. That's the other part of this equation that we're always trying to figure out how to impact people's spiritual awakening or whatever you want to call it. I was at the zoo one day when Packy was pacing around, and this little girl with her mom said, "Mommy, that elephant is sad." This is a 2-year-old child. And I thought this child can see what us adults are so conditioned not to see, right?
Yeah.
So how do you put that childlike understanding into an adult? I don't know the answer, but I'm just saying this is a challenge, because if they did see it, I think they would stop supporting it.
I think if they experienced it, they would stop.
Yeah.
And I wrote a piece about, go into a room and sit with nothing to do. Nothing. Just sit there. Maybe you could pace around. Maybe you could bob your head. How long can you do that? How long can you tolerate that? I got to 7 minutes.
Yeah,
But but if people thought about it,
yeah.
you know, no screens, no anything, you just are sitting there staring out. It would make a difference if people could think that way. I agree
I
with you.
think I absolutely right, and part of the problem is most people don't spend a lot of time. Even the 7 minutes is probably over the limit of most people. In a study they did of, how much time people spend at each exhibit, it's just a matter of minutes. So they don't even get a full grasp of the situation, I don't think.
Right.
That's my frustration when people argue that zoos are beneficial for education because the last zoo that I was at the Fort Worth Zoo, and I stood at that enclosure for hours. And in that time, people came and went. So many children ran up. They were like, "Oh my gosh, look an elephant." And then they ran away. Nobody read the sign, the little placard. Not
No,
that they really would have learned
right,
anything from it, but
right.
people aren't reading it. There's nobody there answering questions. There's nobody educating about what's happening with the elephants. A kid actually ran up as I was standing there and was like, Mom, look, an elephant. I really want to ride an elephant." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, get me out of this place."
Because he's been educated.
There's no education, and the placard at that zoo, I was absolutely shocked. I don't know if you've been there, but the placard at that zoo actually says something along the lines of the cost of living in the wild. And it talks about how dangerous it is for elephants to live in the wild and basically how the zoo is doing them a favor. And
Yeah,
I just, what kind of captivity propaganda is this?
extremely delusional,
Yes.
and they all have the same delusion.
Yeah.
Even the CEO of the AZA, Dan Ash, says stupid things like, "We're elephants are happy to be in the zoo because they don't have to look for their food.
Yeah.
They get to have it delivered to them." That wonderful hay that they get. So, yeah, the fact that someone in that position doesn't know any better or pretends not to know any better is kind of shocking. But how else could they fool the public if they don't at least pretend that they believe it, right?
Yeah. In your experience when you were protesting outside of the Oregon Zoo, what was the response that you were getting from visitors who were coming in to go to the zoo? Were people engaging with you? Were people open to discussion? Were they hostile?
I think it was a full gamut.
Yeah,
We're always happy to see anybody who engaged with us in a positive way, so we counted that as a win. There are, of course, a number of people who say jokingly, "Well, where would you go? You can't set them free. You gonna put them in your backyard?"
yeah,
That kind of thing. But we also one time we were protesting at Zoo Lights, which is an event they do every year near Christmas time, and this whole family decided to turn away and go home. They would not go in once we told them what was going on. And that was an event for, a holiday. It wasn't even about the elephants in particular. But so we have these wins here and there, and that's how we keep going. But it's really a struggle because how do you maintain that awareness? That's another question I have because they could suddenly see it that day and go, "Oh, yeah, But what we don't know and what I do have hopes for is that it lights a fuse, spark, and later on they can think about it. I know it does with the children. We have had a lot of children come over to us and go, "They didn't know about that?" So, anyway, that's the next generation. That's where it has to go, right?
yeah, and I think that
Absolutely.
it's probably more impactful for kids in a lot of ways because adults are just, they forget about it, they justify it, they're like, "Oh, well, I need something to do with my kids on the weekend, so I'm just gonna go to the zoo." Yeah, it might be sad, but I'm just gonna go to the zoo, which is
I think
unfortunate.
it is, but I think you're right spot on that. He gets something to do with the kids,
Yeah,
just some way of babysitting in a way.
yeah,
That's the other thing that bugs me though, is people just let their kids run rampant through the zoo, screaming. It's very noisy in the zoo,
yes.
and they don't have any respect for the fact that it's these animals' home. So that's another part of the education that's missing there.
Yeah. So when you're doing, evaluations for the 10 worst zoos, what are things that you're looking for?
Well, we looked for, many, many different factors, but we started a few years ago on focusing on one theme per year to give it as much attention as possible and bring more awareness to each of the problems that the elephants face. We used to just kind of bring all of the issues, into the one pot. But we started in focusing on, for instance, for what I consider the biggest issue for elephants is a lack of space. And you may be aware of the study that was done about that. And it showed that the very smallest home range for an elephant is 2,447 acres. So when you think about a zoo, that the largest zoo enclosure is maybe 13 acres, and oftentimes it's not even that. For instance, the San Diego Safari Park brags about its, I think, 13 acres or 13, I believe. It turns out that actually it's only 6 acres for the elephants.
Because they don't have access to the whole 13.
They don't. It's for staff, it's for, different things they got going on, but even 13 acres is far from enough space for an elephant, and it's dramatically affects their brains, their bodies, and of course, their spirits. So, this is a cruelty that most people don't see because they'll look at, for instance, elephant lands at the Oregon Zoo and say, "Oh, look at all this space, honey." Because they don't think about what it means to an elephant. A zookeeper I know said he compared it to a family growing up in a bathroom.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
this
mean,
is a
that's a
huge
great comparison.
and then we went on to other issues, and, one of the biggest issues that everybody always focuses on for years and years is the early death, right? Well, that's true. Elephants do die early deaths. A lot of them die as babies from the herpes virus. But in my view, and what David just was saying, when they get to be older, it's even worse because they've lived their entire life in this space with nothing to do and suffering from terrible physical ailments. And we can't even imagine how bad their pain is. For instance, an elephant at the Oregon Zoo, Rama, they put him down when he was 30 years old because the pain meds would no longer work. He was lame because he had fallen into the moat when he was a young elephant, and they couldn't control his pain. So think of how many years he was living in pain and how many years Happy lived in pain. So
Okay.
and elephants are stoic. They don't show their they're suffering a lot of the time. So, I think that's an even worse situation is a long life in a zoo.
But that little girl could see that this elephant was suffering.
Yes.
You know, adults don't you said it,
Don't see it.
adults don't see it, but kids, they don't have any they haven't grown up with it. It doesn't seem like standard operating procedure because they didn't grow up with it, and if you just look at it from a kid's point of view, that's a miserable elephant, and
Yeah,
it's not hard to see.
yeah,
Yeah, and when does that shift, for a kid? When does it shift in their mind from, "Oh, this is really sad and this animal looks
yeah,
unhappy," to the normalization of captivity and captive settings? Because
right.
there has to be a point where it shifts or
Yeah,
it wouldn't be in business.
yeah, that's true. When they become adulterated.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, kids go on field trips to zoos, they
Yeah,
do extracurricular activities that bring them on field trips to zoos and so that maybe just the prolonged exposure to it as they see it more and more, it doesn't become a unique experience that stands out to them anymore like it did the first time,
yeah.
and they maybe realize all the animals look like this, so maybe that's fine.
Yeah, I there's all those factors. I really would like to see a film done about, why zoos need to disappear, to open more eyes. I mean, there's a film about elephants, which I shared with you guys, which does a good job on the elephants. But I think just the whole captivity of exotic wild animals should be exposed more to the public. It's probably hard to get it made and harder to get it exposed through Netflix and things like that. But I would love to see that because a lot of times films do help open people's minds and hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more that we can catch that age where the captive environments become normalized, the better. Because if we can catch kids at that age to say, "Hey, what your initial instinct was correct and this isn't normal and this isn't okay," then that will change them into adulthood.
Yeah. It's harder it's what's hard is getting that information into the school system. Like, I was able to do it in a private school, and we succeeded one time in a public school, but the public school somehow reached out to the zoo, and they protested vehemently and said, "No, you can't do that."
What did you present, Courtney?
We presented, information about the captivity of elephants at the Oregon Zoo, from our position as Free the Oregon Zoo elephants. But the zoo got involved and said, no, you can't do that unless we come in and give our share, our position too. But the school just canceled it outright. The organization that helped us actually canceled it. They didn't want to deal with the blowback.
Yeah. That's so interesting that the zoo
Yeah.
they're like, "Let's have a debate then in front of the school, let's do it."
Yeah. I would love that.
Yeah, I
I
mean, it would
would,
be so interesting to see where the kids
yeah.
would land hearing both sides.
Yeah, the kids that I did present to, they were very young, they were, like, 1st and 2nd grade, but they all were so, "No, they don't belong there."
Yeah,
Right.
They got it right away.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure that the zoos would probably present all the facts and figures of all the money that they give to conservation all over the
Yeah.
world and
Yeah.
all of the ways that they're helping. Which I'm sure you get a lot of even as you guys are publishing your 10 worst zoos list. You probably get a lot of backlash from the zoos saying, "Well, we're doing real conservation work. We're doing good things." How do you guys manage that conversation?
Well, you just point out all the facts because,
Yeah.
first of all, they don't give that much to real conservation in the wild, and it doesn't even if they did, it doesn't justify keeping
No.
elephants or any animal locked up for life. That's another thing I was gonna mention today, I was thinking about is zoos will always pivot to the species. We're protecting the species. They never talk about individuals, but for that individual animal, that is suffering, and you can't justify suffering based on saving a species, in my view. There's no justification for watching someone suffer their whole life. Would you do that to a human being? I mean, I just think that that's a specious argument.
Yeah.
They're causing this the misery. They aren't causing it, and they're responsible for it. And maybe they see it, maybe they don't, but they could just understand you are causing this being to suffer for 60,
Yeah,
70 years.
yeah,
It, how
exactly.
do you do it? Well,
Well, I mean, that's why we're dealing with the breeding issue is because they know this is what's gonna happen to these animals. They know that they've seen it, and they keep on doing it anyway, completely disregarding the suffering that they know is going to ensue. So, they're guilty of that for sure.
Yeah. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about the breeding band group you put together and what kind of inspired you to do that.
Well, you guys are part of that, so you're the inspiration. So what I would say is just, first of all, we would have loved to have done a captivity ban, but a captivity ban, especially on a federal level, would be extremely difficult in the US, as you all know, dealing with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So that's why we pivoted to the breeding ban because in essence, that would end elephant captivity, at some point.
Right,
So that's kind
right.
of what we is an end around, you could call it. There is a captivity ban in the federal government right now. They do not have all the sponsors they need, and I think it's a huge uphill battle, frankly, for them to pass that bill. But just so you know, it's called the SHARE Act, CHER. I don't know if SHARE supports it or not, but I forget what the acronym stands for. But when you're passing a bill at the federal level, as I'm sure you're aware, it's highly unlikely. Very, very few bills even get introduced, much less passed. So that's why we started it at the state level with a breeding ban.
You've been doing this a long time at a very, very intense level. So there's disappointment after disappointment, and you're feeling the worst of the worst in terms of what's happening to elephants emotionally as well as all the other issues. How do you what do you do with that? How do you absorb that and deal with that and keep going on and facing these frustrations one after another?
Question. I don't know if I have a good way of dealing with it. I don't know if you remember this movie, Broadcast News. This reporter would get frustrated and she would just scream for like a few minutes. I thought, well, maybe that's a good way. I'll try that. But no, it's just, what I do, and I'm sure you guys understand and do as well, is think about the few successes. I mean, right now, the Cameron Park Zoo just closed their elephant exhibit after Timbo died.
Right.
And so that's the 42nd zoo to close their elephant exhibit. And we see this, we consider it a trend and we think of it positively as a trend. And the fact that there are now a couple of holiday zoos, even one here in Austin, Texas, that's a wave of the future. So we have to look at those future projections and feel that there is some hope for, change, for evolving, for the human conscious to evolve.
How about circus elephants? You think there's a better shot of that ending much sooner than it would be for
Well, yeah,
zoos?
for sure, it already is ending. I
Yeah,
mean, I know IDA is one of the groups that fought very hard to end Ringling Brothers, and I would go to those protests myself here in Portland before I was in IDA, and there was a tremendous joy when that shut down.
God,
You can imagine.
I can
And,
imagine.
Carson and Barnes needs to shut down, but Universal Soul shut down, Circus Vargas shut down. So, the fact that there's so many and around the world, we have
Right,
a page right now, if you haven't seen it yet, of the 5 best human-powered circuses in the world, and there are a lot of them, I found
right.
out in my research, a lot. So, that is very encouraging. I think people can see a little better or have been exposed maybe longer to the circus world. But the zoo world is another whole challenge because even the people that I protested with at Ringling Brothers would say to me, "Oh, well, the zoo is a good place for them." Really?
Yeah.
So
What
it's just a huge problem. Yeah.
when you were protesting at the circus versus at the zoo, did you see a difference in the way that the patrons of the events were responding to the protests, or was it about the same?
No, they were meaner.
At the circus or at the zoo?
Circus, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's some mean ones at the zoo too. Don't get me wrong, but the circus they seem to be more boisterous. They would come up and yell right in your face. So they were very defensive about that. Yeah.
Which is funny because you would think that you have even less of a leg to stand on to argue for a circus. I get why people who go to zoos who don't know more about zoos and know more about the AZA and what's really going on there, why they could see it as conservation and why they could see it as education until they know better. But the circus, there's no guise of conservation or education
Right.
at all, you know?
Well, that
So
maybe that's why
it's
people protest harder,
yeah,
'cause if they know,
yeah,
if they know they don't wanna admit it, right?
yeah,
And there's nobody who's advocating for it. I mean, it's not like
Right.
I think elephants should be used in so it doesn't exist as far as I know, and I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
other than the circus people find plenty of reasons to support it, of course.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure.
They did for years and years, but yeah, I I'm hoping, I think there's definitely more chance it'll end sooner than zoos, that's for sure.
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like the tide is turning on circuses with even the news from Jordan World coming out a couple of weeks or a month ago.
Yes.
Seems like things are starting to change, and it could be the final nail in the coffin, but only time will tell.
Yeah, and I think it's good to keep the pressure on them too, of
Yeah,
course. It doesn't hurt to reemphasize why it's bad.
yeah.
Are there other programs you're working on currently that you're comfortable sharing with us?
Trying to think of one and specifically because it's just everything, everything that comes
Sure.
across my
Yeah.
plate. Basically, just I'm working on a campaign in Tulsa. We're trying to, first of all, get Billy and Tina out, but all of the elephants there. It's one of the worst zoos
Yeah.
in terms of their behavior. And of course, trying to get a captivity ban in LA. Even the LA Zoo has said they have a pause on the elephant. They will not commit to ending the elephant program. So we're trying to get the LA City Council on board with doing that. This points out to the difficulty with dealing with government. To get enough counselors on board to do anything is just a major thing. I don't know the secret to that because we had counselors that supported it there, but they've got 15 other ones that don't, right? So it's just an ongoing issue to try to get any action out of a city council. And I had so much hope for LA. I had so much hope for LA because so many people supported it.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Mhm.
the thing that is crazy is there was so much public pressure, there was celebrity involvement. I mean, there was so much going on surrounding the LA Zoo and Billy and Tina, and somehow they ended up in Tulsa. And it's such a strange turn of events.
Yeah,
Sanctuaries offered to take the elephants in, and still the LA Zoo in the
yeah,
middle of the night decided to just move the
yeah,
elephants.
yeah. And they've never been held accountable for their decision, the transparency that they used on that. And I don't know that they ever will.
For people listening, what's bad about elephant breeding in zoos or anywhere?
What's bad
But
about breeding elephants in zoos?
yeah, I mean, there are people who are unaware it happens,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
what's bad about it?
Well, first of all, it's very risky because there's a very high elephant calf mortality in zoos, way more than there is in the wild. A lot of young elephants die from a disease called I forget, I can never pronounce the whole thing, but it's elephant
Ele
herpes virus.
Elephant endothelial herpes virus, I think.
You got it. God, that's brilliant. You remember that. So that is a often fatal disease. And also, by the way, it's a very painful, it attacks all of their organs, in case you didn't know. It's a very, very painful disease. But anyway, so a lot of them die from that. A lot of elephants in general have a very short lifespan. And the worst fact, as we discussed earlier, you're breeding elephants to do what? To live the rest of their lives in confinement. Miserable, disease ridden, painful, bored out of their freaking minds, depressed. They can't even forage. This is one of the things that I've been discovering lately is every zoo I see this. Elephants trying to reach under the fence to grab a tiny morsel of grass or get near a tree. There is no foliage inside their exhibit. And this is a grave injustice because they spend 20 hours a day in the wild foraging. That's their main thing that they do. And it's not only, nutrition they need, it's activity, mental and physical activity that they need to stay healthy.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's just these deprivations is what you're dooming elephants to when you breed them. So I ask people, the public, to think ahead a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, you see a baby and that's very cute. Think down the line what's gonna happen to that elephant, even if they live.
That's the problem. They're so cute and they're so
I know,
appealing
I know.
that people don't even think about how they got there or where they're going. But to their detriment, they're They're adorable,
I know.
and and everybody responds to them that way.
I think also people who are unfamiliar need to remember that all animals have an instinct to breed. And I mean, humans included, we're mammals. We have the instinct to reproduce and breed. The only time that an animal is not going to follow that instinct is if they are in an environment where they feel that they do not have the resources to grow their population or their body is under too much stress to reproduce. And it's so interesting because almost every zoo, you can put a male and female together in the yard and they are not going to breed. They're just not because they do not have the space, they do not have the resources to expand their population, which then leads us to needing to do semen collection and artificial insemination, which is traumatic in and of itself. But I think even without getting into that for people, if they understand, what point would you have to be driven to say, no, I can't breed, I can't expand my population, even though that is a natural instinct written within my body as a mammal.
Yeah. Well, the high amount of stress, the fact that they have no choice. In the wild, they choose their mates. Elephant males fight over females, and the females are picky. They don't just go, oh, here's one, I'll go with him. No,
Yeah.
they look around, they make a decision about that. So, taking away choice, I think, is another huge factor. But I think you bring up a really good point about it, Danielle. And I think you should write that down and include that in our rationale for the breeding pan, because I don't think many people think about that and why they don't choose to breed.
You have to be able to draw the parallel and say, if you
Yeah,
wouldn't wanna bring a baby into this world, imagine if you,
exactly.
like you had mentioned earlier, had to have a baby and raise it in your bathroom for the
Right.
rest of your life. You would be even less inclined to have a baby.
Yes, and that brings up a huge point of getting people to relate to animals
Yeah.
as equal beings who need choice, autonomy, and freedom. Yeah, that would be the huge choice, the huge issue in that. Yeah, that whole thing about why they don't breed though is very, very important.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem the zoos have, right? They don't it's not easy for them to breed, even though lately they have been more successful. But AI is extremely invasive,
Yeah.
and I don't think people realize that either, how invasive it is.
For both the male and female.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And did you know that there's a project called Project Frozen Dumbo? It's in the Pittsburgh Zoo is participating in it. They go out into the wild and they dart wild elephants, wild males, and then they extract their sperm. So this is something that's going on. I don't
In
think
Africa or in Asia?
in Africa.
Oy,
I
Africa,
didn't
yeah,
know that.
I didn't
yeah.
know that.
Called, I'm trying to think of the whole name, Project Frozen Dumbo. You can check it out.
Horrible name. Just the
Yeah,
name is
what a
Really?
it's
gross
horrible.
name. How is that even legal? Like, how are the African governments allowing that to happen?
They're
I
paying
guess
money.
money,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah,
They're
yeah,
paying
yeah,
money.
yeah.
That is crazy. I did
But,
not know
also,
that.
Daniel, I wanna mention because you're talking about why they choose not to breed. Well, we do have to mention that in sanctuaries, they are not allowed to breed either. And so, as Ed Stewart always points out, sanctuary is also captivity.
Yeah,
It's not the wild, but it's the best we can do.
Yes.
It's like hospice, it's the best you can do in the situation that we're in.
yeah, and I really like how Ed Stewart and the team at Paws talks about it because they're very transparent about saying, "We're not saying that what we're doing
Right,
is perfect, it's still captivity, and we wish that we didn't have to do this.
right,
But it's the best that we can offer with what we
exactly.
have, and I think that's a really good way of framing sanctuary, especially sanctuary in non-range countries.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a nuance for sure, but
Yeah.
having been to Paws, I can from my own perspective, it's so much better than the zoo.
Yeah.
At least they have choice there, and they're outdoors in a warm climate.
Yeah.
There's just no reason for any northern zoo to have elephants. I mean, that's just adding insult to injury. But, and Carroll Sanctuary they have total autonomy there too. So the ones that I think are doing the best they can, the sanctuaries, I admire what they're doing because at least they're giving them a new lease on life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we like to close out with a couple of rapid fire questions. So questions that you can answer in, a sentence or two. And my first one, which I love hearing everyone's answers to this because some people are so positive and some people are so negative about it. But my first question is, if an elephant could speak directly to the world in our human language, what do you think they'd say?
My first thought is just free me. Understand who I am and what I'm going through, and then do the right thing. That's how I would see it.
Yeah.
I'm not an animal communicator, I have to tell you that, but when
Yes.
I see them suffering, I can't help but think that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. My next question is, what have you learned from elephants that you otherwise may not have been exposed to that has changed how you think about freedom, empathy, or even humanity?
What I learned from elephants is that they're very wise and very, how can I say it, emotional. They have emotional lives that we never have tapped into before. I had not. And they have such a way of connecting to others, to humans. I've heard this from many people now. Even a former circus owner who trained elephants in a circus. He told me he finally realized it was the wrong thing to do and he gave up all his elephants, and he said elephants are almost like humans. He felt that they were very close to human, and there's something about them that you could resonate with, that they have the intelligence and I don't know if you call it empathy, the communication skills,
Yeah.
everything that we as humans say we have, they have it in spades. And Dame Daphne, of course, said elephants are even better than humans. But
I
anyway,
agree with that. I agree with that.
they're so stoic. That's another thing that really struck me about them, and Bob Jacobs says it's because of the structure of their brains, the neurons in their brains, but I don't know what it is. It's a spiritual quality too, right? It's in their DNA. They care for others, not just other elephants. They care for other beings on this planet.
Steve Coyle, I'm not gonna get it exactly right, but it's basically, "If people were better, they'd be elephant."
I
Yeah.
love that quote. I'm gonna ask
Yeah.
him
Yes.
if we can use that quote. That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said that when we interviewed him on the podcast, and I ended up making it the title of his episode because I was
That's
like, "That
great.
is such a great quote."
It is. I just want to say you guys have done an amazing job with doing all these presentations and interviews with
Thank you.
leading
Thank you.
elephant experts. Good job. I just want to also mention that our group in LA, our Billy team, always brings up your articles and shares them and says how wonderful
Really?
they are. Oh, yes, yes.
That's so nice to hear.
So good job.
Well, my last question is for people who are listening, we want them to feel empowered. We know we talk about some really heavy and oftentimes sad stuff. And so we want people to walk away feeling empowered that they can make a change. So, what is something that anyone can do to help elephants?
I would say the first thing is get informed because the more you learn about it, the more your mind, your heart opens up.
Yeah.
Of course, I recommend IDA's website. We have a whole elephant campaign, many different avenues to research and explore and just read about, as well as Weeping Elephants Project, which is a new organization doing great work that people should check out. And then I think it's important to look at different videos. Compare a zoo that you've gone to a sanctuary or the wild. Look at these videos and understand the difference so that it's not like just academic. You can actually see it for yourself.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I would suggest. And then I would say take your children to other animal facilities, sanctuaries for farm animals, or whatever there is available in your area. So that it is good to expose children to animals and learn about animals. But unfortunately, the zoo is just exposing them to suffering, and
Yeah.
that's not going to help them learn about animals.
Yeah. I think that's a great point too is parents, if they are more informed on what's happening at the zoos, would probably feel that they don't want their kids exposed to that because it's sad. Why would you want your child to be seeing animals in these conditions and see them in such poor mental and physical health? And I think that's a really huge point for parents to keep in mind that, you're not really exposing your child to something positive when you're bringing them to a zoo. But if you go to a farm sanctuary or, something similar to that, like you mentioned, those are really beautiful places where they can interact more closely and learn about the
Yeah,
animals and be in a
exactly.
safer environment too.
There's all kinds of rescues too where you can visit, like, there's a donkey rescue here in Oregon. I think there's a llamas they use for therapy, but, it's not a bad life for the llama, honestly.
Yeah.
But they have other kinds of rescues. I mean, so even the animal shelter, go to your
Yeah.
animal shelter and walk the dogs, because they need it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever you can do to help animals is good. And now our next thing is to find a really rich person, like Bill Gates or I don't know, somebody rich, and have them fund all these publicity and promos and movies and to get true exposure, like the zoo does. The zoo has
Yeah.
plenty of exposure, right?
Yeah. Well, and the zoo just has such a huge budget for marketing and advertising,
That's what I mean.
and
Exactly,
all
exactly.
of us nonprofits are at such a disadvantage
I
because
know.
they
Yeah.
have millions of dollars that they're putting into their publicity. It's
Uh-huh.
hard to match.
It's nonstop. I mean,
Yeah.
if you watch their Facebook accounts, and especially when there's a baby,
Yeah.
Yeah.
unbelievable. It's every day, every minute of the day, they're videotaping them and posting it on Facebook.
Well, and they're just making so much money when they have a baby. A baby of anything, of any species of baby. People
Yeah,
are just flocking to the zoo to see
yeah,
babies.
and that's another thing we should highlight in our breeding ban is the financial incentive for breeding.
And that was another thing that Steve had said in our episode with him. I think that he had mentioned this in the episode that he's like, "Yeah, if a zoo wants to make money, just have a baby. That's the fastest way to
Yes,
make a bunch of money."
that's another great quote, and very true,
Yeah.
very true.
So I'm gonna ask you some questions, and our hope is that you'll never say the word elephant. You can't include elephant people or elephants. This is outside of that work, such as, you have a favorite book or a most influential book that you've read?
Oh, it's going to involve that word.
Can't say that word.
Okay, I can say a movie I really liked was, with Bob Fosse's movie, Cabaret. It's a very old movie, but I thought it was brilliant.
Let's go to the elephant people or the elephant books or the elephant movies.
It
Yeah.
What
didn't
have
last long.
what what's been most influential or that you've, liked particularly?
Uh, Book or movie?
Either one.
Either one. Book is Elephant Whisperer.
Oh, that's such a
Uh,
great one.
Oh, yeah, that's just brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah.
Movie? Okay, my movie.
Yeah.
Like
perfect.
shameless promotion of myself. I think my movie is good, but my movie covers a lot of animals, not just elephants. But I think it's a very hard thing to make a good movie about elephants is what I've seen. They're slow moving, they don't do exciting things.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge. And what do they do in a zoo? Nothing, right?
Right.
So I find it's very challenging.
Alright, back to the non-elephant portion. Before we do that, I just want you to say the name of your movie and where people can see it.
From Suffering to Satori, it's on Vimeo,
Okay.
and I can send you the link.
Cool. I'll put the link in the show notes so people can watch it.
Okay.
Other than ours, any podcast that you listen to, enjoy, would recommend?
That's I watch a variety of them on more political issues than I do on animal issues because the political world is so insane right now.
Mhm.
It's kind of my way of dealing with them.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, that's an understatement. So that's kind of my way of, I don't know, vicariously being at the gladiator thing.
Yeah.
Right,
It's just so horrible that it kind of like watching a murder movie. "Oh my god, can you believe they're doing that?"
right,
Yeah.
right. And the last question we ask is, who do you like better, me or Danielle?
You know I can't answer that question,
I know you can't answer it.
but I
I
would
hope you
like to
don't
have
answer it
dinner
because
with
I
both
think
of you. I would
We would like
enjoy
that
dinner with
too.
both of you. Oh,
We would like that too.
it's been really a pleasure,
Yeah, it's
Courtney.
been
I'm
so
glad
fun.
we're working together and we did this, and you've done amazing work over the course of a lifetime.
you.
It's very impressive to me.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate all your work too. and I'm so
Thank you.
glad you're on our coalition.
Yeah, thank you for including us. We're really
So
excited
glad.
about it and
Yeah.
happy to be doing more collaborative work. I think that's kind of
Yeah, I
the
think
way
that
we're gonna get things done.
yes, yes, absolutely, I agree
Yeah.
100%.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
We need an
Yes.
army to go after the AZA.
Yeah.
We're the
No
army.
no kidding, we do.
Uh, well, have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
doing this
Thank
interview. I
you.
really appreciate it.